Chapter 381, Upholding Justice. Even long after Fang Qi had left, the two still couldn't calm down. The man's name was Li Longyuan, the eldest direct disciple of Xuanhuan. What do you think of the power of that spiritual spell as compared to those recorded in the ancient documents? The woman, Ling Wanian, was the eldest direct disciple of Yugj Mountain. She said in surprise, "You mean?" "No, we've never heard of it before. Besides, the teleportation ray had been sealed long ago. How could he have come to this continent?" In the long history, only people of the Three Saint Gates shocked and dominated over others, not the other way around. Even if there were any people who had ever shocked and dominated the Three Saint Gates, they only existed in the secret scrolls of the various factions that recorded the incidents of the ancient times. New task: the power that shocks the world. Task mission: 1. Rescue the players who are being tortured due to playing games in our shop. 2. Establish dominance. Completed. Task description: don't scheme to destroy our shop's business by suppressing the customers. It's time to establish dominance and shock the enemies. Task reward: prize will claimed. Without the array drawing power from the heaven and the earth, the sky regained its clearness as the clouds and wind settled down. However, in the clear blue sky, there seemed to be a pair of eyes that was watching the whole incident. This pair of eyes seemed to be there ever since the creation of the universe and hadn't ever moved, but no one had ever noticed them. When Fang Qi led the others out of the Taixi faction, for some reason, he turned his head and looked at the distant sky. However, he didn't see anything extraordinary. The defeated factions must accept the reality and act like it. The cultivators of the major factions and forces had thought that they would capture the Emperor of Dajin, but now they were astonished to find that they had become prisoners. It was unimaginable. Where are the cultivator troops? Where are the battle reports? The old Taoist of Dragon Sea Taoist Palace was especially puzzled. After all, he had acquired his special communication jade from an ancient relic, and it was made of the top quality ancient spiritual jade, which meant that even big arrays couldn't affect the transmission of his messages. "Kid Ji Wu, what do you want?" the Fat Zhu family master roared in a fury. "Do you think that you can sit back and relax after killing us?" Ji Wu tossed a list to him and said, "This is the list of costs that our Wu Taoist alliance spent on the projects related to this war. If you have no objections, just sign your names on it. After your factions compensate all the damage that you caused to my country, I'll release you guys for sure." Despicable, shameless. Jade Hill Mountain Master looked at the long list and said, "Kid Ji Wu, this is blatant blackmail." Ji Wu ignored their shouts. Instead, he took out a heavy jade much bigger than the ordinary communication jade and injected a bit of warrior ki into it. This is the communication jade that was newly developed by the Wu Taoist Alliance. By now, only a few seniors of the Wu Taoist Alliance have the right to use it. After the injection of warrior ki, he controlled the communication jade and created a virtual picture in the air above the jade. Different from your communication jade, this one can transmit pictures and videos besides messages. Transmit what? They looked baffled, not knowing that there existed such a weird communication jade. "This is a video that they just sent to me. You can watch it." In the video before them, young men and women had their limbs tied, and lightning energy got injected into their bodies by spiritual artifacts under the threats of the cultivators of Taixi faction. The shrill screams chilled the hearts of everyone present. What is this?" They all looked horrified. About one day later, the cultivators of Xuansong Manor and Yugj Mountain, the two biggest forces in the cultivation world on the continent, gathered together. "What happened to the Taixi faction?" an old Taoist wearing a purple robe asked in a trembling voice. "It was severely damaged. Most of the high-level cultivators were killed, and their faction guarding Grand Array was shattered. Even the spiritual essence in the spiritual vein underground was almost emptied. Even if they can recover from this disaster, they will be reduced to a third-tier faction. In short, it is ruined." Li Longyuan answered. "They went too far." A grey-robed old Taoist yelled, "No one had ever beaten our Three Saint Gates so hard for many years. I'll go and avenge the Taixi faction." Elder Yan, the Taoist sitting at the head of the table, wore a white robe and a jade belt. With a whisk in his hand, he looked very dignified. He opened his mouth and said, "I know that you are close to the elders and the Taixi faction, but this time, Dwyu Holiness worked behind us and incited the big factions to suppress the UG." He glanced at a disciple beside him, and the latter whispered, "The Origins Internet Club." "Ah, the Origins Internet Club," he continued, "we must consider this issue carefully." "Consider what?" A red-robed elder yelled in a fury. We still need to consider after someone raised the Taixi faction to the ground. Should we wait until our own factions are destroyed? I don't agree. Right. I don't agree as well. Faction Master, I don't agree either. We all don't agree. We must avenge the Taixi faction. The elders were indignant since no one had ever dared to show any disrespect to these three factions for the last thousands of years. But today, one of the factions was almost razed to the ground. It was outrageous. The two faction masters looked at each other with bitter smiles on their faces. You can't enter. At this moment, a terrified voice came from the door. You report. Several disciples guarding the door came in with reluctance and reported, the masters of the different factions are here. We can't stop them anymore. With a large group of elders and elite disciples behind them, the masters of Jade Hill Mountain, Linglang Mountain, Dragon Sea Dao's Palace, and the other big factions came into the room with fierce expressions on their faces. Guys, what do you want? The elders of Xuanhuan Manor and Yugzhi Mountain stared at the intruders with cold eyes. In a bright green robe, Jade Hill Mountain Master looked extremely gloomy with veins bulging on his forehead. I seem to have heard someone say that they want to avenge the Taixi faction. Do you have any objections? The red-robed elder looked at this group of people in disdain. In his mind, these people were useless and fought for small interests. Even if they gathered, they were nothing in his eyes. However, this group of people was unified today. It was an unusual sight. Jade Hill Mountain Master waved his arm and yelled, how dare you beat him for me? Attack! My Linglang Mountain will throw caution out of the window. We trusted you three Saint Gates so much, but you did such shameful things and treated us this way. Beat him! Beat anyone who dares to avenge the Taixi faction. Today, the useless factions in their eyes shared a mind, which dumbfounded even the masters of the two saint factions. What's happening? Chapter 382, The new items in the shop. Who? You mean you are using this kind of force now? Xuanhuan had been on the instant noodles treatment. After picking up noodles with her chopsticks, she didn't eat but talked about Orochi Divine Light with amazement on her face. She didn't wake up from the amazement until a while had passed. Yeah, the Zichi spiritual master said with a nod. You mean we can learn it too? Of course. This shop has all kinds of ultimate techniques. The technique that the shop owner used is one of them. The Zichi spiritual master drank up the soup of the instant noodles. I must go now. Yunner is calling me to play the King of Fighters. It doesn't feel right having eaten instant noodles for several days now, Xuanhuan said in bafflement. How come both the spiritual essence and the demonic essence in my body are being purified right now? It just removed the impurities from the demonic essence but doesn't get rid of it. What should I do? Cackle. At this moment, a black cloud floated by with gloomy laughter. This shop can't solve your problem, but I can. Now that you've gotten a part of demon physique, only I can help you. Go away. Xuanhuan had the urge to throw the bowl of instant noodles onto its head. Although she didn't do that, she did punch it with her fists. Stupid demon, do you think you can block the shop owner's divine light? Even at your prime, what percentage of Yakuan demon strength do you have? Ach, you dare to go against me? I'll gather my spiritual essence and punish you for good. It took a deep breath and sucked in spiritual essence in anger. On the other side, Mr. Fang glanced at the energy bar under the teleportation array. Ugh! It increased again. Meanwhile, in Mr. Fang's QZONE, a section in Mr. Fang's living room was turned into a compartment to accommodate about 10 arcade machines. It is okay if you can't afford to buy the game. Come to my place, and you can buy one token with 15 gold coins. Insert the token, and you can start playing the game. Mo Xian walked in with Xuanhuan and found many players in the compartment. A white-haired old man Nalan Hongwu was sitting on a bench with a purple-clothed young man Song Qingfeng, moving the joysticks wildly. Clap clap clap. With sweat popping out on his forehead, Nalan Hongwu slammed his big hand on the gamut pad. Song Qingfeng controlled Yari Yagami and shouted, Kuzuke's, strong punch, and Shikiaoi Hena. Light jump. Low kick. Are you stunned? Smugly, Song Qingfeng used Iori Yagami's desperation move. Clap 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 clap. Nalan Hongwu shook the joystick wildly as if he could get out of the difficult situation by shaking the joystick and smashing the buttons. Right now, Xuanhuan was watching them play from behind, and Mo Xian whispered while her face twitched, let's go and watch others play. The senior is a newbie. Nalan Hongwu's face turned dark, and he was at a loss for words. Soon, They walked over and stood behind Lu Ningyan and Zichi spiritual master's seats. They heard Lu Ningyan introduce the game. You must come here to play the King of Fighters and learn the most proper combos. Master, I'll show you how to play it. Then, she stared at the screen with a serious expression. Look at my fat opponent. His name is Chang Koyan. Watch how I use a combo on him. Okay. Zichi spiritual master watched earnestly. This fat guy's moves are very lethal, so we must dodge first and find a chance to fight back. While Lu Ningyan explained, Chang Koyan on the screen smashed a chain hammer at her character. See? I've found his attack rhythm, Lu Ningyan said while controlling Kyokusanaji. Then, I will dodge and before she could finish her words, the big fat guy on the screen caught Kyokusanaji, who tried to dodge and smashed him onto the ground right away with vicious force. I was careless. It was an accident. Let me start again. Thud, thud, thud. Ms. Lu, you are great at playing Chang Koyan. Lin Shao and the others came over and glanced at the screen while saying blithely, you took out Kyokusanaji without losing any HP. Lu Ningyan instantly blushed. Zichi spiritual master Shui Jianin. Maybe I'll go and find the shop owner, the Zichi spiritual master said hesitantly. I heard that his skills in the King of Fighters are awesome. Lu Ningyan gritted her teeth and couldn't say much. Meanwhile, at the tea table in the lounge of the half-city shop, I heard that Dajin had won another war. A mystical-looking young man with white hair and white clothes was eating spicy sticks while sitting on the couch. Yeah, they won the war by a landslide. Black Demon nodded repeatedly. Despite the fact that he had gained a tremendous growth in his cultivation strength, he didn't dare to show any disrespect to this young man. The young man looked about 18 years old, but he had been at the top position among the forces in the inner city while the Reincarnation King's Reincarnation Palace was still a small force in the outer city. Black Demon explained, they even used some sort of communication warfare, and one of the methods they used came from our half-city. They used it on their new communication jade, which could release special waves and trick the combined army of dozens of forces. Who could have imagined this method of warfare if we didn't hear it from them? By the way, they even allow us to purchase the findings of some of their research projects. Purchase what? The mystical-looking young man waved his hand and said, if they can do it, we can do our own research as well. You just show me how to play it. They say that there is better stuff in there, right? Black Demon froze for a moment and then said, no problem. Then, he beckoned at a couple of Black Demon guards and said, summon some guys, and we'll go and rob the Pacific Bank. Get a few more Kurumas. Rob Bank Kuruma? The young man looked at Black Demon in bafflement while eating spicy sticks. Yeah, this is the fastest way to make money. Black Demon said in high spirits, when we have enough money, we can afford to research lots of stuff. I heard that the Wu Taoist Alliance had begun producing crystal cars. I got it now. I'll bring more people to rob this bank thing. Let's go and drive cars. Obviously, after watching Mr. Fang's live stream, many players began playing the King of Fighters, and the sales of this small game had reached 900 and was still growing. The compartment for the King of Fighters in Mr. Fang's QZONE was full of players shaking the joysticks and coming and going. Meanwhile, curious about Dajin's miraculous victory against the invasion, many forces began to study their tactics. As news spread, the sales of Grand Theft Auto 5 shot up again. At this moment, Mr. Fang looked at the wheel on the system interface and saw 3 items, 3 movies, and 4 games on it. Final Fantasy 7th Advent Children, A Chinese Ghost Story, Devil May Cry 3, Onimusha 3, Resident Evil 3, Godly Weapon Fragment, Celestial Bean, Random Bloodline Elixir. While looking at the games, movies, and items, Mr. Fang began to turn the wheel. Bloodline Elixir? Mr. Fang was tempted. This is good. If I take it, no one will dare to criticize my poor talent anymore. 1 round, 2 rounds, 3 rounds. Mr. Fang stared at the wheel when it stopped. Devil May Cry 3. Meanwhile, a prompt appeared on Mr. Fang's system interface. The number of players for a single small game reaches 1,000, and you have achieved the accomplishment, bringing in a fortune each day. You got an achievement gift bag. Do you want to open it? Open. You've obtained Red Bean Milk Tea, only sold in winter. Mr. Fang. Chapter 383. Very satisfied. At Xuanhuan Manor and Yugj Mountain, the 2 faction masters have their hands full right now. The elders who clamored to avenge for the Taixi faction were now surrounded by dozens of masters of various major forces. Despite the elders' high strengths, they were outnumbered. After all, These elders were at the same level of the 4 elders of the Taixi faction, Zhu, Chen, Kang, and Dao, which meant that they were not extremely powerful. The elders could play dumb, but the masters of the 2 saint factions didn't dare to play dumb after hearing these masters recount the whole incident. After Dwyu Holiness created the scandal by trying to suppress a force, they couldn't possibly butcher all the cultivators on the continent just to shut them up. After all, as the faction masters of saint factions, it was wise to protect their own factions even though their Taoist friends were killed. Guys, to protect his personal interest and due to his distorted mind, Dwyu Holiness made a huge mistake. Now that he is dead, and his accomplices were killed, I hope you guys can put this whole thing behind you, the purple-robed, old Taoist said. Due to our limited cultivation strength and lack of time, we weren't able to discover his wrongdoings in time and thus can no longer call ourselves saint factions. From now on, we'll cultivate in seclusion, and at this moment, their top priority was to appease these angry people. Otherwise, the elders who had clamored to avenge the Taixi faction would be beaten to death by these furious cultivators. What kind of damn situation is this? The 2 faction masters looked at each other. Both appeared to be having headaches. Avenge? They would be thankful if they could get out of the current situation unscathed. Red bean milk tea, 6 crystals cup. Mr. Fang glanced at the introduction on the system interface which said that the red bean in the milk tea was a top-quality spiritual crop from a plant named fire thorns, and it had a natural rich fragrance. The milk tea powder was ground from a black tea which had been cultivated after experimenting for generations and produced with many exquisite processes. It even had a detailed explanation of the milk powder and the meticulously selective dairy product. As for the water for making this milk tea, it was the volcanic cold rock spring water specially provided by the system, and this water had been used in making Sprite, Coke, and instant noodles. While reading the introduction that comprised over 10 lines of words, Mr. Fang wondered, it's just milk tea. How can you make it sound so awesome? Half City was gloomy and chilly, and its snow came earlier than Xuanhuan City in the winter. When Fang Qi opened the shop in the early morning, the snow outside the door was already thick. When one stepped into it, the snow could cover up to their ankles. The warriors and cultivators could resist the severe chill by circulating the qi or essence in their bodies. Some high-level spiritual garments contained arrays which could adjust temperatures. For cultivators, the winter didn't bring them many inconveniences, no matter how cold it was. Zumo was shoveling snow in the street in front of the shop with Saint Spirit sword techniques. Despite the heavy snowfall, the business in the shop was as good as usual. While many of the customers were cultivators, the number of warriors in the shop began to grow, even though there were few of them in the Morning Star Sea Realm. Black Demon, Yuanhang Pavilion, and the other forces had begun to recruit warriors. Since Snail and Hongwu almost killed Divine Palace Realm cultivators with Sword 23 at Taixi faction, the status of warriors had grown in these people's minds. The cultivators in Half City used to look down upon this group of people, but now they began to put emphasis on them. At least for now, they realized the potentials of warriors. The players living in Half City such as Ruaning, Xiu, and even Ningbai from the inner city came very early to the shop in the morning. Now that some experienced players had mastered the sword control technique, all kinds of sword energies landed in front of the shop one after another. Ugh! They blinked and looked up at the stairs leading to the second floor, nonplussed. Sir, how come your quilts fell down the stairs? I'm so cold. At this moment, a howl came all the way from the second floor to the first floor. A big pile of quilts was shivering at the foot of the stairs. When are we going to Xuanhuan City? Achoo! A pair of red eyes peeked out from the quilt and gazed at Mr. Fang in hope. Mr. Fang's face turned dark. What are you doing bundling yourself in Little Mo's quilt? Can't you resist the chill with your spiritual essence? Achoo! It inhaled a mouthful of spiritual essence. Then, Mr. Fang saw that the energy bar under the teleportation array grew again. He kicked it back to upstairs and said, you demons never die, right? Just take the cold as a way to strengthen your body. After this interlude, someone soon saw the new information written on the small blackboard. Sir, what is red bean milk tea? A new beverage. Mr. Fang took out one cup and poured it for himself. Soon, a rich fragrance of milk mingled with faint tea scent permeated the air. It smells so good. Ningbai's eyes brightened while she lightly licked her lips. Sir, your food is always appetizing. If it continues, I'll run out of money simply from buying the food in the shop. Can't you sell it for less? Will you run out of money because of food? What can poor people do then? Mr. Fang saw through her and pointed it out mercilessly. Humph! You're not fun. She rolled her eyes at Mr. Fang. I'll take a cup. One for me too. When they sipped the milk tea, the warm and silky fragrance of milk flowed from their mouths to their bellies and hearts. So delicious. Pleased, Xiao sipped her milk tea again and sat down on the couch. It's warm and cozy. Compared with Coke, this taste is more lingering. Really? Is it really so warm? A pile of quilts came down shivering and looked at the people drinking milk tea with longing eyes. Mr. Fang glanced at it. Do you have money for it? If no, get out of here. Who said that I don't have money? Achoo. Then, 1, 2, 3, 6 crystals were piled neatly on the counter. You still have crystals on you? How come I don't know that? Mr. Fang dragged over the quilt and shook it as if he were shaking a piggy bank, but no crystals came out. No more. No more. You can't take any crystals from me. With a series of screams, it was tossed aside by Mr. Fang, and it scrambled to pour itself a cup of milk tea. Soon, a figure bundled in quilt sat on the couch. Wow, it's indeed warm. Hey hiya, I'm very satisfied with this milk tea. All the customers who were sipping milk tea were at a loss for words at the sight. Sir, what is Devil May Cry 3? After all, it was quite rare for the shop to have 2 new items in one day. Chapter 384, Devil May Cry 3. Devil May Cry 3 Virtual Reality Remake, 30 crystals for activation per person. Is Devil May Cry a game in which we can beat devils or demons? Baffled, the customers began to speculate. We'll be beating the devils and demons so hard that they will cry? Is this the reason for the name of this game? Yeah. What's this game about? Upon entering the shop, Lu Ningyan immediately asked, is it like the Legend of the Sword and Fairy where we can kill devils and exterminate demons to support the orthodox Tao? Obviously, she was interested in this genre. Since the game's name was Devil May Cry, Mr. Fang said, you guys can just take it as a story about a half-devil. Ugh, half-devil? Hearing the words upon entering the shop, Mozian involuntarily pulled her junior sisters further away from Ningbai. She whispered to Xuanhuan and the others, it's surely not something good. Will we fall into Devil Dao by playing this game? We'll be in danger if we get key deviation and fall into the Devil Dao in the game. It seems like the shop owner is planning to play it himself now. They watched Mr. Fang walk to computer number 1 with a cup of milk tea in his hand. Meanwhile, the warriors and cultivators in Zhuhai City shop had also noticed the new items of the shop. Sitting happily at the counter, Jiang Ziyu poured herself a cup of milk tea before opening QQ. She was very pleased that Mr. Fang allowed her to move a computer onto the counter. Boss, many customers are asking about the game Devil May Cry. Mr. Fang saw Loli's avatar jump on QQ and immediately clicked it open. Tell them that I'll put the new game on the live stream. Okay. Fang Qi glanced around the shop and saw that people were either playing The Legend of Mare 2, watching TV series, or driving in Grand Theft Auto 5. Some were even playing The Legend of the Sword and Fairy and Diablo 2. It was quite lively in the shop. The shop owner is going to live stream the new game? It was still early, and some idling people were still lounging on the couches, eating instant noodles or sipping the newly released milk tea. Hearing that Mr. Fang would put the new game on the live stream, they immediately perked up. Another game with a weird name. Sitting on the couch, Lanyan looked at the big screen while eating instant noodles. Ms. Nalan, what do you think this game is about? Nalan Mingzhu said, I hope it's about warriors. After all, the previous released Grand Theft Auto 5 mainly featured potential spiritual artifacts, and Shu Mountain was undoubtedly about cultivators and their cultivation system. Warriors couldn't relate, and it did little for them. In other words, in the whole shop, only the King of Fighters and Wind and Cloud mainly featured warriors, but there was no virtual reality game focusing on warriors yet. As a self-disciplined girl, Nalan Mingzhu was eager to increase her strength. You're right. It would be great if we have a game like The Legend of the Sword and Fairy but with a focus on warriors, Lanyan said, but I guess it's not plausible. After all, it's usually cultivators who fight devils and demons, right? While they talked, the big screens were turned on. Before them was a European-style building. The bright full moon rose high in the sky, giving the sky a weird blue color. You've heard of it, haven't you? The Legend of Sparta? It sounded like the beginning of a story while the smooth and reminiscent female voice brought the audience into that magical and amazing world. When I was young, my father would tell me stories about it. Long ago, in ancient times, a demon rebelled against his own kind for the sake of the human race. With his sword, He shut the portal to the demonic realm and sealed the evil entity off from our human world. But since he was a demon himself, his power was also trapped on the other side. Forgetting to swallow the instant noodles in her mouth, Lanyan watched the fighting scenes on the big screen with widened eyes. After all, she was a girl who had never seen a real devil before, and she had never heard such stories before. No. Is this a story about a devil? Lu Ningyan and Mo Xian were dumbfounded. Words like devil and saving humans were enough to completely flip their worldviews upside down. Subconsciously, they glanced at the devil who was warming itself with a cup of milk tea while bundling itself in a big quilt. No way. How can this thing save humans? Baffled, they turned their gazes back to the big screen. Ahem. Why are you look at me? I don't know anyone named Sparta. On the big screen, the calm but somewhat sentimental voice continued telling the story. I never believed it. I thought it was just a child's fairy tale. I discovered that the so-called legend wasn't a myth at all. Sparta existed. How do I know? Well, I met the sons of Sparta, both of them. On the big screen, two figures became clear. One was a young man who looked handsome, valiant, and somewhat demonic. He wore a dark red coat and had a double-handed sword in his hands. The other looked 90% similar to the first young man, and he wore a blue windbreaker. They swung the sword and saber so fast that their movements were a blur to the audience. Only the turbulent winds created by the movements of the weapons left gray arcs in the rain, showing that their swords had moved at an extremely fast speed. Although they were both fighting at close range with weapons, their combat styles were very different from those used by the warriors in this world. Without sword energies or even warrior ki attached to the swords, the winds created by the fast movements of the sword and the saber showed the audience that each move contained explosive strength. The warriors in the audience were fascinated. Though the same blood of their father flows through their veins, the two battled each other fiercely like arch-enemies. It seems as if they derive some twisted pleasure from this brotherly fighting. But in the end only one was left standing. Like a lightning bolt, one of them pierced his sharp saber into the other's chest. He died? The audience gazed at the big screens without blinking, enthralled by the fierce and bloody fight. If these two little guys are like me, they can't die. But it seems that they are imposters. They don't even have 1% of my power. With that said, a devil sipped his milk tea smugly. Then, the scene turned to sometime much later, and a white-haired young man walked out of a room in one piece. He's indeed unkillable? It almost spat out the milk tea in its mouth. Dante, the son of Sparta, was obviously the main character of the game. The audience watched as Dante was raided by devils and demons in his own shop, and he was pierced by sabers, sickles, and other weapons. Then, he pulled out these weapons from his body before fighting his adversaries. FCK. How come this guy is so awesome? He's intact after being pierced like that? Chapter 385, Boast First. Dante's identity was like an investigator of mystical phenomenons. All his life, he had been fighting with supernatural demons and vicious devils, saving humans from the devil's minions. Of course, he didn't plan to be a superhero. As a demon slayer and a descendant of a human in the legendary Dark Knight, his shop had not begun operation and didn't even have a name yet. His main business was hunting the demons who had spread all over the human world. His sword, a big one with a devil face engraved on the sword guard, was left to him by Sparta. It was named Rebellion since its owner had betrayed his kind to save humans. It was a powerful demonic sword, and its thick body was excellent for close-range combat. However, when necessary, it could follow Dante's mind and fly out to attack enemies. Meanwhile, he had a pair of guns, ebony and ivory, which acted as long-range weapons. This guy can use guns? When Song King Feng and the others saw Dante accurately hit one of more than a dozen billiard balls that were sent to the air, and that the billiard ball hit another before it continued like a chain reaction until all the billiard balls were hit and struck the lesser demons who surrounded him. His marksmanship is unrivaled. This guy is so dashing. How can one shoot so well? What technique is this? Even Nalan Hong gazed at the big screen intently. He has the devil bloodline in his body. Ningbai looked very interested. I'm surprised that he is the main character. After all, most of the cultivators in Half City were more scared of her than awed by her. Some even repelled her unconsciously. However, now, she actually saw. I'm surprised he is the main character. Soon, it was time for Mr. Fang to control the character. The players watched as Mr. Fang swung the double-handed sword with whistling sounds. Mr. Fang dodged an attack and appeared before a lesser demon in the blink of an eye. piercing the skeleton demon wrapped in a black robe and holding it up high with his sword. Then, he controlled Dante to jump high. Fang Qi remembered that when he first played the game, he could hit the monsters repeatedly in mid-air in a combo. However, in the virtual reality version created by the system, Dante paused in mid-air while he launched several attacks at lightning speed before smashing his heavy sword down into the monster's face. Crack! With a huge noise, the sword hacked the hard skull of the skeleton demon into two halves before cutting deep into the hard ground as if it were a piece of tofu. Meanwhile, a devil on the side hacked a sickle toward Mr. Fang. Be careful! This monster launched a sneak attack. So sneaky! While people exclaimed in alarm, Dante spun the two handguns, ebony and ivory, in his hands, and the audience saw some energy gathering at the end of the gun barrel. Not ordinary guns, they were guns that could kill demons. At this moment, the sickle was almost about to cut into him with vicious force. Boom! Mr. Fang pulled the trigger, and a bullet shot out like a cannonball with red light, sending the demon flying backward with its sickle. This is... The audience looked at each other. The guns can be used like this? Obviously, Dante had attached some demonic energy to the bullet, which was why this shot was so powerful. The audience saw a new possibility that they had never imagined before. Of course, it was not that they hadn't thought of it, but that the ordinary guns couldn't achieve this effect. However, these were the guns for people with real cultivation strength. Then, the double-handed sword that was as tall as one man hacked down viciously. Boom! It cut both the demon and the wall behind it into two halves. The sword didn't show any spiritual light, but Dante put all his strength into swinging the sword. However, this horrifyingly powerful sword swing showed the viewers the ultimate fierceness of close-range combat. The combat method of using the big sword and guns alternatively was unheard of before. At close range, he struck with his sword. From a distance, he used the guns. The movements were as smooth as flowing water. It fascinated not only fans of guns but the warriors who used cold weapons. They were all eager to try this battle method. This kind of combat is so enjoyable to watch. Even the cultivators including Xuanhuan voiced their appreciation. The Hell Vanguards managed the dead in Hell. They were the Grim Reapers that even the residents of Hell feared. Soon, Mr. Fang controlled Dante and killed his way out, and he encountered this demon. What's this thing? It can teleport? It shouldn't be teleportation. It moved very fast and disguised itself for one instant, which made it look like it teleported. The audience watched intently while this black-cloaked god of death hovered in the mid-air with a huge sickle in its hand. It kept disappearing and then appearing while its sickles struck from various impossible angles. Each strike was lethal, and the viewers watched with their hearts in their throats. How come this monster at the beginning of the game is so strong? Is it a boss? Intently, Mr. Fang controlled Dante to dodge the huge sickle that was coming from all directions. His dodges and counter-strikes made the audience's eye go blue and their heads become dizzy. With even a small mistake, a huge wound would appear on Dante's body. The sword moved like shadows on the big screen while Dante moved in the ruins like a ghost, dodging and counter-striking. Awesome! People like Song King Feng yelled in astonishment. This guy is FCKING good. In the half-city shop, people like Black Demon were also excited. What's going on? Ningbai was baffled, wondering why these demons always fought at such close range. From my understanding, we demons always use spiritual spells. Although our physiques are tough, how come they are fighting this way? However, while watching this enthralling combat, she tilted her head and bit her lower lip with her sharp teeth, looking hesitant. Should I use my strength this way as well? It doesn't feel right though. Humph. He's blessed with great strength but resorts to this low-level combat method like warriors. On the side, the big demon said while sipping its milk tea, gulp. He's indeed a weak junior left behind in the human world. He's lucky that he didn't meet me, or I would have sent him flying with one breath. Anyway, it was going to boast first. Chapter 386, The Law of Time. Dante's elder brother, Virgil, who moved in the human world, visited Dante's place. To gain more strength, he decided to awaken the power of their father, Sparta. While he searched for the forbidden book which contained the information about Sparta, he met Arkham who urged him to awaken the demonic tower, Temen-Nigru, which had been sealed in the prehistoric times. This tower contained the portal leading to the demon world. Under the setting sun, the ground cracked, and rocks surged up like waves. Looking down from the sky, the audience saw the huge city center consisting of all kinds of buildings which extended to the horizon. In the center of these buildings, the ground suddenly cracked open, and a huge and grand tower slowly rose. Wearing a blue windbreaker, Virgil stood on the tower. His chiseled face looked like a perfect demon statue under the setting sun, and the god of death lay on the ground behind him like an obedient pet. Yamato, the name of Virgil's katana, flashed, and he withdrew the saber without looking back. Like a piece of garbage, the upper half of the god of death slid off its body and fell to the ground. This guy seems more powerful. His saber technique is awesome. So dashing. People like Song King Feng yelled, "I want to play this game." Just imagine the scenario in which his saber flashes and the sneak attacker behind him being hacked into two halves as he withdraws the saber. It was super dashing. A large group of people were watching the live stream in the half-city shop. Do all the demons in this game engage in close-range combat? They don't look weak at all. Baffled, they continued watching. Ugh, can we learn techniques from the game? Soon, they saw Mr. Fang open the level-up interface and glanced at Dante's techniques. Mr. Fang had played it before, but in the virtual reality version where everything looked more real, he had to refresh his memory and get more familiar with the techniques. At the beginning, Dante had 4 styles, each of which would change his techniques and moveset and affect the combat greatly. The styles were Trickster, Swordmaster, Gunslinger, and Royale Guard. The Trickster style focused on agility and moving methods, which was similar to mastering footwork. It would enable Dante to dodge many attacks and get close to his opponents quickly. Also, he could dash in mid-air, scale buildings, and teleport a short distance. The beginning level was level 1, and the players could level up by accumulating experience points through killing monsters in battle. The Swordmaster style focused on the attacks of close-range weapons. This style would enable Dante to use powerful close-range techniques, and each melee weapon had its own style of attacks. The Gunslinger style focused on the attacks of long-range weapons. It would allow Dante's guns to launch very dashing techniques, such as Kalinaan's homing missiles. The Royale Guard style focused on defense, which required the players to have a high control of timing. It couldn't be used to completely block the damage coming from enemies alone, but if it were used at the instant when the enemies touched Dante, it could block the attacks and knock back demons without strong demonic energy, as well as leveling up this style. Each successful complete defense would absorb the enemy's attack, and the accumulated damage could be released onto the enemies, inflicting huge damage. On the level up interface, people saw that 2 styles at the bottom were grayed out, which meant that they couldn't be activated at the stage. Quicksilver style not activated. It will consume Dante's demonic energy and automatically stop when his demonic energy runs out. When it was used, all the people except Dante would move extremely slowly. At this moment, the enemy's attacks and movement speeds would be reduced to 1/10 of the normal speed, while Dante's speed won't change. Doppelganger style not activated. This style can't be leveled up, but it will consume Dante's demonic energy and automatically stop when the demonic energy runs out. Can only be used when the demonic energy meter is more than 3 bars. When it is used, there will be 2 Dantes. One will be his shadow clone. The doppelganger will use Dante's current weapons but won't change weapons if the true form does. If the true form doesn't change weapons, his doppelganger will use the same moves as the true form. The doppelganger will be invincible and possess the same damage as Dante. FCK. While the audience watched the combat, they were fascinated by this novel and powerful combat style. However, if they used this method on cultivators who were agile, far away, and knew the sword control technique, they would be at a disadvantage and forced into a passive situation similar to current warriors when they face cultivators in battle. Therefore, regardless of how powerful the strikes were, they were useless. However, when they saw the Quicksilver style, they were stupefied, and their minds went blank. Is this controlling time? The law of time? The big demon who was sipping milk tea yelled, "What's in this little guy's bloodline? He can even understand the law of time? It's something even I can access. Only the true kings of my kind have the right to understand it." The cup of milk tea fell to the table. Fortunately, it was now empty, so nothing was spilled onto the ground. What did I see? It's faked. Must be faked. Impossible. It was unimaginable. Just think about it. If a warrior combined teleportation with the control of time, even demons would be no match for this warrior, let alone cultivators. Moreover, it would be more terrifying with a doppelganger, which meant that one could double their power. Besides, one of them was invincible. Now remembering Dante's horrifying hacking strike with explosive damage, People no longer thought that close-range combat was a disadvantage at all. The people in the audience looked at each other and saw fear and shock in their eyes. They couldn't wait to try it. Ningbai said, "Sir, I want to play this game." The Zuchi spiritual master followed, 30 crystals for activation. I'm leaving the money here. Going online now. Black Demon added, I'll try it too. People like Mozian and Yuyan had said that they looked down at this main character, but they quickly glanced at their master before looking at each other. Shui Jian put down the crystals and said, "Junior sister, wait. I'll try it too." "Should we?" Mozian murmured. "Shall we try it as well? Isn't this guy a descendant of a demon? Will we experience key deviation and turn demonic by playing this game?" Yuyan asked. "Did you see the shop owner experiencing key deviation? Let's go." "Hurry. We won't be able to learn that so-called law of time if we're slow." "Don't you see that Master and the others are playing it?" "Hey, wait for me." When they arrived at the computer zone, the seats were all taken. Dazed, they asked, "Sir, are there any available seats?" Chapter 387, Visitors from 3 Factions. Obviously, the game was so fascinating that some customers who had been engrossed in watching Mr. Fang play the game found that there were no seats available for them now since the others had grabbed them already. They had to stand behind the others and watch them play. Although Devil May Cry 3 was a game leaning toward warriors, it didn't mean that cultivators couldn't play it. In fact, some cultivators had begun playing it already. Some cultivators such as Shui Jian and even Ningbai were considering if they should practice close-range combat techniques as well to increase their combat strength. Soon, not only warriors but quite a few cultivators had begun playing the game. In Xuanhuan City, Song Qingfeng, the royal princess, the second prince, and other warriors had all grabbed seats anxiously to get online. "What's the hurry?" Zhao Langyu, Li Zui, and other disciples from Shengjing Academy or Zai Academy, who had come late today and thus missed the live stream, were very curious. "You don't understand. It's a new game." At this moment, 2 figures came to the door and looked inside before pushing open the door and cautiously walking in. "Taoist Brother Li, is this the place?" The person who spoke was a snow-white female Taoist wearing white clothes and a jade belt. If Fang Qi were here, he would recognize that she was Ling Wanian, the direct eldest disciple of the Yugja faction since he had met her at the Taixi faction that day. The other was a purple-clothed young man carrying a treasure sword on his back. He was Li Longyuan from Zhuansong Manor. "Humph, it doesn't look like a dangerous place like the Dragon's Lake and Tiger's Den," Li Longyuan said in a cold voice. "It's just an ordinary shop." He pushed open the door and walked in. "How come it's so huge inside?" His eyeballs almost popped out. Although this shop was located on an ordinary street in Xuanhuan City, it was full of cultivators and warriors including quite a few Divine Ocean Realm and Emperor Warrior Realm masters. The customers each held a cup with a picture of red beans and milk on it in their hands, and a big straw was stuck in each cup. A white-haired senior sipped from the straw in full force, looking extremely intoxicated. The 2 newcomers hadn't seen this expression on anyone else before. "Ah!" Elder Fu exclaimed after finishing his drink, "My lord, this red bean milk tea is so good." Before they knew it, they walked to the counter and saw an exquisite loli. "How can I help you?" "Ugh," Li Longyuan whispered, "Master told us to gather information. We can draw attention to us by acting hardy." Of course, after witnessing the Orochi Divine Light technique that day, even though they were the eldest direct disciples of 2 out of the 3 Saint Gates, they had to keep a low profile and keep their tails between their legs in this remote country of warriors. "We'll take red bean milk tea." Ling Wanian pointed at a passerby who had just poured himself a cup of milk tea and said, "Just like that one." "Right, right." Li Longyuan agreed and nodded. "1 cup for each of us." 12 crystals for 2 cups. "So expensive?" Ling Wanian mumbled. "Not so expensive," Li Longyuan said. "The spiritual jade marrows that we use in our factions are precious drinks that one can't even buy with crystals." "The so-called milk tea can only fool these warriors of Dajin," he whispered. Then, he went over and poured 2 cups of milk tea. Not caring to try it, he said, "Let's go and see what these guys are doing in this shop." "Hey!" At this moment, a golden-robed young man walked over. "Is this red bean milk tea in your hands?" "Yeah, what then? You two have good taste." The golden-robed young man waved his folding fan and said graciously, "From your looks, this is your first time visiting in this shop, right?" At first glance, you picked the shop's new item for the winter, the red bean milk tea, that many cultivators crave for. Good choice. Good taste. Oh? Li Longyuan asked curiously, can you explain what you mean? Isn't it just an ordinary beverage? How come cultivators crave for it? You may not know it, the golden-robed young man said expansively, but this red bean milk tea is made from red beans that aren't ordinary, and the milk tea is from precious spiritual tea and spiritual milk mixed in a certain proportion. It's rich but not greasy and has a lingering fragrance. They gaped at the golden-robed young man. It is really that good? Li Longyuan sipped it subconsciously. Wow! Instantly, his eyes widened. Taoist brother Li? While holding her cup of milk tea, Ling Wanian stared at Li Longyuan curiously. What? Is it really so good? Li Longyuan took a deep drink. Gulp, gulp, gulp. Soon, they could only hear the sounds of sucking on air. Taoist brother Li? Even more baffled, Ling Wanian asked, how is it compared to the spiritual jade marrows in your faction? It's not something special for us, right? It's all gone already? Before she could finish her words, Li Longyuan opened the cap and poured the red beans and leftovers into his mouth. Burp. He belched. Ling Wanian were dumbfounded by the extreme pleasure showing on his face. Hey, you gulped it down. It is a waste of this precious beverage. The golden-robed young man stomped his foot in frustration. How can you drink the milk tea this way? Then, how should we drink it? Ling Wanian's interest was piqued, wondering how delicious this drink was that it had made Li Longyuan lose his composure. Zhao Yulv explained, you must put the straw deep to the bottom of the cup and sip the mixture of the red bean and the milk tea. The fragrances of the red beans and the milk tea combining and colliding in your mouth will create the best taste for you. I didn't know there was so much technique required in drinking milk tea. Ling Wanian sipped the milk tea following his instructions. She almost screamed. 3 minutes later, they each held a small tray with spicy sticks, instant noodles, and Coke on it. While enjoying the snacks, they stood behind one computer to watch this person play the game. Taoist brother Li, I'm surprised that the delicacies in this shop are so delicious. I wonder how good is the game that Gongzi Zhao mentioned. It's a pity that the house is full, and we can't experience them now. Don't worry, we can enjoy the snacks while we wait in line for our turn. Ling Wanian mumbled with her mouth full while she sipped her milk tea and stuffed a spicy stick into her mouth. Wow, the spicy sticks are so delicious. Meanwhile, Ningbai and the others who were lucky to grab seats had begun their journeys in Devil May Cry 3. Chapter 388, I lose if I fall. This sword is so huge. How should I swing it? While controlling Dante, Mozian held the broadsword rebellion with both hands and felt uncomfortable. Hiya! With a roar, she yacked the big sword forward but saw the small demon moving to the side weirdly. The sword blade missed it by 1 inch, and it was intact. Meanwhile, the other small demons surrounded her. Seeing that a demon pounced at her with a sickle, Mozian copied the shop owner and spun the 2 guns in her hands very elegantly. But they flew out and hit the demon in the face. After the demon with the sickle was hit on the face by the guns, it roared and hacked the sickle toward Mozian's head at a greater speed. H. She hacked wildly with her sword. It was clear that the Zichi spiritual master and the other cultivators were not doing any better. Although they could learn the basic sword techniques and shooting techniques that came with Dante while controlling him, the small demon's damage, speed, and intelligence were not as low as those in the original version of the game. Even the residents in Hell, the lowest level monsters, had cunning minds and high intelligence as well as battle abilities that ordinary people couldn't match. Sir, how come this game is so difficult to play? Ruan Ning yelled already. She had just died at the entrance of Dante's shop before meeting the boss. Mr. Fang said in contempt, you are controlling the son of the legendary Dark Knight Sparta and got killed by some minions. You dare to tell me that the game is hard to play? You are just a noob. Ruan Ning's face turned dark. Scummy shop owner. Should we follow Dante's instincts and will then use the sword techniques accordingly? A lazy voice sounded on Ningbai's screen. She was battling with the Hell Vanguard. Of course, Mr. Fang said, if you don't know the sword techniques and want to control the character with your own ideas to show off, it's natural that you will get killed by small demons. Then, he casually rolled his eyes at Ruan Ning and said, look at how smart she is. Obviously, the warriors in the Zhuhui City shop didn't have the same problem. Even Song Qingfeng and the others who didn't have high cultivation strengths learned techniques and experiences from Dante's moves. They could easily deal with these small demons. Ugh! While sipping milk tea, Ling Wanian was watching the game from behind. Taoist brother Li, look at this guy. He's so powerful. Is he a warrior as well? On the screen, Nalan Hongwu controlled his character with ease while he swung the big sword with whistling sounds. He was so fast that his movements were a blur to others. He watched all directions and heard all the sounds. When the Hell Vanguard silently appeared behind him, he turned abruptly while the sword vanished, leaving sword energies surging around. With a powerful demonic body and surging demonic energy, he could launch swift and heavy sword strikes at any moment. Hey hiya, my swordsmanship is awesome, eh? He asked as if he had eyes on the back of his head. The moment he said it, the Hell Vanguard god blocked Dante's attack with its sickle, and the huge counterforce to this heavy hack sent Nalan Hongwu stumbling back. Before he could regain his balance, the sickle hacked down at his head. Ah damn it, his face was covered in blood. The two people who watched the game from behind froze. After hearing Zhao Yulv's brief explanations, they had barely understood what games were. They said in horror, are these warriors fighting with these horrifying monsters each day? Looking at the Hell Vanguard which floated around from left to right like a ghost on the screens, Ling Wanian said, Taoist brother Li, look, many of them are playing this game. Should we try this game later? In the Mr. Fang's group tour chat on QQ, a new topic was brought up today. Black Demon, anyone playing Devil May Cry 3? Where are you now? Tang Yuan, I hate to say it, but this game is so hard to play. I haven't gotten out of the shop yet. Song Qingfeng, Akita Inu's cunning smile. I'm fighting the Hell Vanguard. Nalan Mingjiu, the Hell Vanguard is hard to fight. At this moment, Nalan Hongwu wiped the blood off his face and laughed, reporting in the group, I've killed the Hell Vanguard. Anyone faster than me? Meanwhile, Mr. Fang was about to arrive at the gate guarded by Cerberus, the three-headed hell dog, without a word. But his movements and controls were a little strange. Mr. Fang swung his sword upward and knocked up a huge monster that was holding a sickle. This monster was obviously much stronger than the previous small demons. It had thicker skin and more HP, and it also moved faster and could teleport. After slashing it into the sky, Mr. Fang murmured, drop hack should drop hack again. It should be like this, right? How come I can't connect the moves? Since all the virtual reality games followed the laws of the physics of the real world, the scenes in the original game where the monsters didn't move after their bodies were pierced by various weapons would not appear in the remake version. However, Mr. Fang was clearly undaunted. While controlling Dante, Mr. Fang swung the big sword so swiftly that it became a blurry shadow. He hacked downward once before doing it again, and it seemed like two lightning bolts crashing down. In the new version, I have to drop hack twice with power to subdue the demon with my force, and I can then knock it into the air. After his hypothesis was proven, he leaped up and hacked onto the demon in midair. Hack and shoot. After 2 strikes, Mr. Fang quickly landed. Ugh, I could do it in the original game. Mr. Fang could use the double-handed sword so well that he could make flowers out of it. But when everything followed the laws of physics, the moves that he used in the original version were no longer effective in the new version. Wait, Mr. Fang thought about this problem while moving to the side to dodge another monster's blade strike. My pause in mid-air wasn't done right. Swift and powerful sword strikes can open the monster's bodies without causing too much momentum, but they will still fall to the ground. Also, the monsters of hell have tough bones. There is no way that I can cut through their bodies without sending them flying. The only solution is to strike its joints that are only connected by demonic energy, Fang Qi thought. Meanwhile, Dante can stay in the air a bit longer with the recoil force of firing the guns. Different from the original version, I must fire vertically down on the ground to obtain the largest upward momentum and achieve the longest pause in mid-air for Dante. If the bullets are shot toward the ground, it would be best if they could bounce back and shoot the demons that I'm attacking to give them an upward momentum. I got it. Then, Mr. Fang controlled Dante to attack another demon. With perfect timing, he launched 2 swift and heavy strikes and then knocked the monster up with his sword. Then, Mr. Fang's character moved so fast that it looked like Dante was twitching in mid-air. He was striking with his sword and firing his guns so fast that only afterimages and vague shadows could be seen on the screen. At this moment, some nimble and clever players had killed the Hell Vanguard and passed the stage. In the chat group, Song Qingfeng posted a screenshot. I'm awesome. I killed the Hell Vanguard already. It's nothing. I did it long ago. Ning Bai also posted a screenshot. I did it too. I look up to you guys. Advanced players. Awesome. Smooth. At this moment, someone yelled in astonishment in the internet cafe, FCK. How come the monster that the shop owner is fighting is not dropping to the ground? Chapter 389, Release, Grand First Show. In the blink of an eye, Mr. Fang struck out nearly 30 times, and the last Hell Sloth moved behind him with his sickle raised high. Almost at the same time, Fang Qi controlled Dante to hack down at the Hell Sloth before him with vicious force while dodging the blade of the demon behind him. By now, many players gathered behind him to watch him play. Now, the demon behind Mr. Fang struck down again after the first strike missed. While controlling Dante, Mr. Fang seemed to be intoxicated in his own combat rhythm. With one foot stepping on a monster's body, he slid out as if he were on a skateboard and fired his guns repeatedly, forcing the nearby monsters to retreat. During the process, he dodged their attacks with perfect timing. In the end, he stomped on the elite monster under his foot, and it exploded into a cloud of demonic mist and shattered bones. Come on! Under Mr. Fang's control, Dante beckoned at the monster before him and taunted it mercilessly. Then, he slashed his sword abruptly. With a heavy sword strike, Mr. Fang knocked the last Hell Sloth out of the herd of demons and shot it onto the second floor. Under Mr. Fang's control, Dante repeatedly attacked the Hell Sloth that he had secluded from the herd of demons as if he were having a stroke. When the small demons followed him onto the second floor, Dante used the monster's body as a skateboard and crashed down to the first floor while firing his guns wildly. The series of plays were dizzying to watch. When Mr. Fang killed his way to the second boss Cerberus, the three-headed hell dog that was guarding the demonic tower, he had gotten proficient with the moves which were derived from Dante's great strength and swordsmanship. After all, Fang Qi had his own deep understanding of the game, guns, and sword techniques. What's the shop owner doing now? In Mr. Fang's group tour in QQ, the players in the Zhuhai City shop were baffled. I suggest you watch the shop owner play the game. So powerful. How powerful? Nailin Hong was not pleased. Kid Fang passed the Hell Vanguard, and so did I. What's the difference? Yu Yan, no. I feel like the shop owner is playing a different game compared to us. Nailin Mingjiu, that's strong? Don't be all hack with the sword. Husky's baffled face. Su Tianji, what's this guy doing now? Sir, don't turn off the live stream. Please, sir. Continue the live stream for a bit longer. At this moment, Mr. Fang was leveling up his skills in front of the gate of the boss, and he noticed the boisterous group chat in QQ. Okay, soon, Mr. Fang turned on the live stream, and a huge ice mountain appeared before Dante on the screen. Ugh! How come they are all watching the big screen? At this moment, Ling Wanian was busy eating instant noodles. Look! Li Longyuan pointed at the big screen. As if it had sensed the intrusion of an outsider, the ice mountain collapsed under violent shakes, and many huge ice blocks fell. A horrid demon with 3 heads walked out. It was as big as a mountain, and its whole body was covered in thick ice crystals. This Cerberus didn't only have great strength. It also excelled in ice elemental magic spells, possessed great intelligence, and could speak the human language. Obviously, it was way more powerful than the Hell Vanguard. It breathed out powerful chilly energy, which turned everything it touched into ice. The horrifying chilly energy that it emitted could even stop the circulation of spiritual essence in the ordinary cultivators' bodies. It was another powerful demon. Do these guys fight this kind of monsters each day in the fantasy world? Li Longyuan ate a spicy stick and said in a low voice, does the shop owner fight the monsters too? While swallowing down a mouthful of instant noodles, Ling Wanian said curiously, the character and the moves are the same. I wonder if the shop owner can play the game differently. Then, they turned their attention to the game on the live stream. The Cerberus raised its heads. An intense, storm-like chilly energy rushed toward the tiny human before it. The chilly currents swept across the ground, and Fang Qi soon had no place to stand on. Humph! This 3-headed demon is smart for sealing the ground, knowing that this warrior can't fly. Li Longyuan said with a snicker, this warrior looks strong but can't fly. After all, warriors are far weaker compared to cultivators. The moment he said it, Fang Qi's Dante jumped up high into the air and used the sword and fired the guns alternatively with swift movements while hovering in the air above the Cerberus's heads. Ice debris flew from the heads of the Cerberus, and the ice crystal armor covering one of its heads was shattered by Mr. Fang's swift, heavy strikes in the blink of an eye. Soon, the other 2 heads slammed toward Fang Qi's Dante. but he was already hovering in the air above another head of Cerberus with a red light flashing on his feet before striking and attacking repeated as if he were having a stroke. In the original version, Dante couldn't keep himself in the air for long by the recoil force of his guns. But now, Dante's sword strikes produced a counter force which added to the recoil force of the guns. With these two forces added, it seemed like Mr. Fang wasn't going to land on the ground anytime soon. While striking and shooting, Mr. Fang explained, "Will I fall to the ground? No way. Look, it's still spitting ice on the ground stupidly, but I just won't fall to the ground." Cough, cough, cough. Xuanhuan choked on a mouthful of milk tea, and her eyes instantly opened wide as if her eyeballs would pop out. Xuanhuan almost dropped the spicy stick that he had just picked up. The other two heads of the Cerberus launched attacks toward Mr. Fang crazily. However, the latter shot at the wall, and the recoil force helped him quickly fly away. Then, a dark red magic array flashed beneath his feet, enabling him to jump in the air as if he were stepping on land. He double-jumped in the air and turned to another direction, and sword strikes followed. Soon, the ice crystal armor on all three heads of Cerberus was shattered by Dante's wild attacks, which had also inflicted many wounds on the heads. Undaunted, the Cerberus took a deep breath and spat again. Mr. Fang had just landed on the ground, and he jumped up again and said, "What do we call this?" "I call it a moron who doesn't learn from his mistakes." A series of wild strikes followed. After several rounds, the Cerberus finally gave up its strategy of sealing the ground. With a roar, all three heads rapidly pounced at Mr. Fang. Finally landing on the ground, Mr. Fang suddenly made a defensive move. Then, a white light flashed abruptly. Royal Guard style release. This was a special defense technique which could absorb the enemy's energy using perfect defense and return it to the attacker. Although Fang's Royal Guard style didn't have a high level, it was enough. Everything happened in a flash. After the white flash disappeared, distinct horrid wounds appeared on all three heads of Cerberus. Before the audience could understand the situation, Cerberus fell to the ground with a sad howl. FCK, what happened? Is this the end of the battle? Chapter 390. Can't do it. Even after the lesson, the audience had been astonished that he could remain in the air for a long time and even perfectly dodge the attacks while doing so. They weren't expecting a more stunning last move. Obviously, the last strike was more powerful than the previous ones. The most shocking to them was that Fang's Dante was intact and not injured at all under the attacks of this powerful demon. Moreover, how come their Dante didn't have these moves? Just like what Xuanhuan has said, I feel like the shop owner is playing a different game. You're not a human, right? Cerberus looked astonished. Each of Dante's weapons had an extraordinary background. For example, his first sword rebellion was left to him by his father, the legendary Dark Knight. Before Dante was another weapon. The demons or demon beasts only submitted to great power. After Cerberus was defeated, its huge mountain-like body shrank slowly until a heavy tripartite nunchaku hovered in the air while emitting vague blue light. The rods were like four-edged icy crystals. The moment that Fanghi touched the weapon, he felt the powerful ice energy inside. An ordinary person would have been frozen into an ice statue upon touching it. On the screen, Dante whistled and swung this weapon swiftly, making the others feel dizzy. Taoist brother Xuanhuan whispered with a bowl of instant noodle in her hands, "This guy seems very powerful." Xuanhuan's face twitched. How come warriors can be so powerful? It's said that a warrior had broken the four-symbol grand array, and he was only at the early stage of the Emperor Warrior realm. Xuanhuan was at a loss for words. All of a sudden, he felt like this shop presented a brand new world to him. He was very unfamiliar. How can warriors be so powerful? Soon, the game interface gave the ranking for the entire gameplay for this level. This game had a stylish ranking system, and the players would receive a ranking after clearing each stage. The ranking would affect the rewards that each player reaped at the end of each stage. In fact, it was a mechanism similar to the synchronization rate. From the interlude animation, people could see that Dante had a showy personality. He liked to show off his skills, and each of his moves and battles was dizzyingly dashing but very effective and to the point. The better that players could use this kind of combat style, the higher synchronization rate with Dante they would obtain, thus getting more rewards such as more cultivation strength and experience points. Under Mr. Fang's ranking, people saw that the number of red orbs and stylish points was several times higher than what they got after killing the Hell Vanguard. However, when Mr. Fang killed the Hell Vanguard, he got an A+ ranking, which was only a little higher than their rankings. Compared with Nail and Hongwu's ranking of A, Fangqi received only a few more red orbs and stylish points. How come the gap is so big? They were dumbfounded. If they copied Mr. Fang's combat style and obtained such a high ranking, they would achieve a tremendous increase in their cultivation strengths. Even the grandmasters such as Nail and Hongwu would obtain an obvious increase in their cultivation strengths. Besides, the virtual reality version was made according to the real world, which made them wonder if these moves could be used in battles in the real world. Their breaths began to slightly quicken. Sir, how did you do those moves? How could you stay in mid-air for so long? How did you use the last move? How come we don't have it? After all, they all played the same character, and their levels were not too different. Ningbai gazed at Mr. Fang's screen and quietly asked, "Can you teach Big Sister?" Mr. Fang was at a loss for words. They also wondered about the move which protected him from his enemy's sudden powerful attack and inflicted great damage to the latter. This combat technique was so powerful. If they could master it and use it in the real world, the warriors would get stronger under the attacks of their enemies, not vice versa. In this situation, the cultivators who couldn't find a good solution to this technique wouldn't dare to cast their spiritual spells. Otherwise, they would be killed by their own attacks. Kid Fang, can you explain it to us? Nail and Hongwu yelled and sent a bullet comment onto the big screen. It's simple, Mr. Fang explained to the audience while the live stream was still on. In virtual reality, Dante's downward sword strike combined his own strength, the sword's weight, and the demonic energy to increase the gravitational pull, which was why the force in the downward strike was much more powerful than the ordinary ones. It explained why the damage of the strike was extraordinarily powerful, and why Mr. Fang killed the boss so quickly while everyone was watching, but they were stuck and had to take half a day to kill the Hell Vanguard in the first stage. Mr. Fang continued to explain, all of you know how to leap into the air and hack down, right? It is Dante's downward strike. Then, he demonstrated the downward strike by putting all the weight on the sword and empowering it with his demonic energy to achieve great momentum. He quickly left a deep cut on the ground in the demonic tower. Then, Mr. Fang continued to explain, first, we need to use the complete downward strike onto the monster and then change the property of the demonic energy in the body to leap up. I believe you can all do that, right? With that said, he controlled Dante to demonstrate while leaping into the air. He used only the recoil force of the two guns to keep him in the air for a long while before falling. This was the knowledge contained in Dante's character, and all the warriors could have learned it long ago. However, while Mr. Fang explained it, most of the people subconsciously had a bad feeling. He told them that it was easy, but it didn't sound so easy to them. When we knock the monster up into the air with the sword, we must precisely cut the sword into the monster's joints, which will give the minimum momentum to the monster's body. If we apply this technique to humans or animals, we call it painless autopsy. Ningbai and the others looked at each other. After all, most of them couldn't even hit the monsters yet with their swords, and he wanted them to cut into the monster's joints without error. While Dante is in mid-air, it is the best time to strike with the sword. I believe you all have witnessed to strike. However, we can't land on the ground while striking, Mr. Fang continued. Instead, in the instant when the sword cut through the monster's body, we need to withdraw the demonic energy that we used earlier to increase the weight and dropping speed before turning it into the light body energy, which will enable us to hover in the air with the assistance of the recoil force of firing the guns. Then, you shoot downward. Then, they watched as Mr. Fang found a monster to demonstrate the strike, shot, strike, shot on the big screen. The character had struck his sword over 10 times in one instant as if he were having a stroke. All the people were speechless, and they felt hopeless and desperate. It must be noted that striking with the sword would happen in a flash, and so would firing the guns in mid-air. In this moment, they also had to convert demonic energy in their bodies. They must repeat these moves again and again while their bodies rose and fell repeatedly. More importantly, they had to strike with their swords with maximum force. How can a human do all these? Damn it. Are you a demon? Wait. This Dante seems to be a demon. Then, what about the white light at the end? Many people intently stared at Mr. Fang on the big screens, putting all their hopes on the next technique.